This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Hannam.
And I'm Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, the murderous campaign to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank continues by the Israeli military unabated. The ceasefire has ended, and now the murderous campaign of the Israeli military is turning its sights on southern Gaza, where the Israeli government told Palestinians to go to become safe from the attacks in the north. As Palestinians fled to the south, Israel has decided to start its bombing campaign in the south, and as we're speaking right now, U.S.-made bunker-busting 2-ton bombs are being used by the Israeli military to bomb southern Gaza. It's a catastrophe unfolding right before our eyes, Jamal. 1.8 million Palestinians are displaced. Of the 2.3 million, 17,000 have died. 70% of those are women and children. The catastrophe continues unabated. We're going to be talking about that and many other topics today, including the Israeli economy, which is in a shambles right now. That's costing the Israeli economy $53 billion. And of course, U.S. taxpayers will continue to fund that. We're also going to be talking about the Jerusalem Post, as it was peddling lies that Palestinians were somehow faking deaths and dead babies by using dolls. That was proven to be false. They issued a weak apology. And also, Jamal, I think it's time that we start talking about this new campaign that's being started, which is #DumpBiden. I'm going to talk a little bit about that if there's time later on in the show. But before we get to that, we're going to watch a really great interview you did with Yara Jamal. She worked as a production assistant and web writer at the CTV Atlantic Bureau in Halifax for over a year before she said she was terminated with no cause and no warning. She was fired after participating in a pro-Palestine rally and expressing her views on Israel during an interview. She's the only Palestinian and Middle East reporter at CTV Atlantic, and she was terminated unceremoniously, Jamal. It's a great interview.
Yes, Jess, and this is a new trend. Actually, we've had many guests, as you know, ranging from professors and journalists and so forth, who came under attack for criticizing Israel, right here in the United States. But now it's a global trend, which I call the international McCarthyism era, that had begun, but now the new target is young professionals, and she's just like the latest victims of one of the latest victims of this trend. Just a couple of days ago, a new graduate from a law school had her offer rescinded from a well-known law firm. Similar story. So now they're targeting young people at the beginning of their careers. The minute they open their mouths and say, criticize Israel as it's committing a genocide in Gaza. Let's watch Yara Jamal. Israel continues to indiscriminately bomb Gaza and kill civilians. The death toll now exceeds 15,000, more than 6,000 of whom are babies and children, not counting those still buried under rubble. Thousands more are expected to die from Israel's siege. In the recurring tides of international protests by broad-based coalitions of people renouncing Israel's violence, the younger generation's support for Palestinians have been overwhelming. Panicked pro-Israel defenders are resorting to professional, economic, and political coercion to ostracize and muzzle disenergized Palestinian advocacy. The end goal is to quash young professionals at the beginning of their careers who express pro-Palestinian opinions by either firing them or rescinding job offers. There is a new McCarthyism against criticism of Israel. It is a chilling international trend. One recent example of this was when Palestinian-Canadian journalist Yara Jamal was dismissed from her job by mainstream media giant Canada TV. She's joining us on Arab Talk this week to talk about the cause of her dismissal. Welcome to Arab Talk, Yara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Canada TV is part of Bell Media, which is in turn part of BCE, a publicly traded company. What was your position at CTV? What kind of stories did you cover?
So basically, I was behind the scenes, and also I was a web writer for them. And a lot of the stuff that I wrote for them was local stuff. It wasn't much international. A lot of crime in the area, in the city I'm living in Halifax. So, yeah, just a lot of like local stuff in.
So what were you told was the reason for your dismissal?
So initially, I was brought in for a meeting right after the Twitter thread had started. The moment I got the phone call from my manager, I immediately knew, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to get fired over this. I knew. But then I went to the meeting and he told me that I broke the collective agreement and therefore, and I spoke on a political matter that put the company in a bad place. And I was just let go, just like that. And when I asked what exactly did I break, what can you specify, what is it? I didn't get it there.
So just to be clear, your comments regarding the incompatibility of Zionism with Palestinian-Jewish coexistence in a future state were made personally, not as a representative of CTV. Is that correct?
Oh, no. It was my day off, and someone asked me if Jewish people can exist in a free Palestine, to which I answered honestly, a free Palestine cannot exist with the Zionist state, the Zionist ideology, and Jews can exist as the Zionist ideology cannot. That was on my day off. I have never once, during my time at CTV, the entire time I worked at CTV, I never put on my social media that I work for CTV. I never told people I work for CTV. When that person asked me, I never told them that I work for CTV. It just, the Twitter thread had started, people started Googling my name, and they found out that I work for CTV. It wasn't something that I've done purposely. And I told that to the managers as well.
Does CTV have a specific policy regarding criticism of Israel, such as language that is not allowed? For example, occupation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing.
So when I was there was no specific email or like policy that told me you can't use those words. But again, like one of the parts of my job was also helping with writing the script on the teleprompter for the host or the journalist. So sometimes when I see, let's say, the Palestine-Israel conflict, I would change that. I would tell journalists, hey, it's best if you say the Palestinian cause, and because the word conflict is not the right wording. So I would tell them that, but then a lot of times they would change it back because the producers would see us and they would change it back to what they originally wanted. So I knew, just in my head, I assumed that they have to use certain language. Even if I had told them as a Palestinian, even if I had changed it as a Palestinian, they would change it back.
I want to read a quote from a CTV diversity statement, and here I'm quoting. It is a core principle of CTV News to represent ethnocultural groups, indigenous people, and persons with disabilities in a balanced and accurate manner, Our policy is to seek out diverse voices, not only the types of stories we cover, but also in our sources, on screen, on the air, behind the scenes, and within our workforce. I mean, you are of Palestinian origin. Are there other Palestinians, Arabs, or even Muslims, people from the Middle East that can offer a diverse perspective when reporting on Israel / Palestine at CTV?
Absolutely not. No, at all. Nothing. No. At the newsroom, so I was working for CTV News Atlantic, and Atlantic included Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and yeah, big cities. And I was the only Palestinian in the entire CTV News Atlantic. And I was, to my knowledge, to this day, I was the only Middle Eastern. So I'm, for a fact, no, absolutely not. Because when I walked into the newsroom, when I was hired, I looked around, I was the only person. Like, noticeably, I'm the only person. There's no Asian. There is no Black. There's no Indigenous. There's nothing. There is just like only 3 or 4 more people other than me that were of color. And they weren't journalists. They were just behind the scenes. So, no, I would say there's no when it comes to Middle Eastern, absolutely not. There's none.
So I've just read really, again, their diversity statement. And earlier you've mentioned that you've corrected some script and they basically did not agree with you. So I'm looking at it. Before this incident, did you think your perspective was valued and sought after, or were you just a box to check for that diversity?
By multiple people, I was consistently made, even by the managers, and I told that to management, to their faces. My existence is nothing but a box to be checked. There is absolutely a lack of diversity. There is no education or inclusion in the newsroom. Like I told them, I think we should even have posters in the lunchroom about diversity, something, anything for people to understand, or like a course that they can take. Anything, or even like more diverse stories or more stories about immigrants. Like I said that multiple times. It was not taken. And I just knew that.
In an article, you talk about how at CTV you were subject to multiple racist comments about being Palestinian and the legitimacy of Palestine. Although you reported them to human resources, there was never any investigation or follow-up. Talk about this.
I started working at CTV in September 2022. Literally in October 2022, I had a few people come to me, and one of them, a producer, came to me and they were like, I was wearing like a sweater that said Haifa, Palestine, because I'm from Haifa. And they were like, "Oh, are you sure that's in Palestine?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Palestinian. We knew this." And then they were like, "No, I'm pretty sure that's Israel. That's an Israeli city. I think you're mistaken." And then I said, "You can't really tell me where I'm from. I'm from Palestine. You can't just keep on pushing on that." And then that conversation just went the same, where she's just consistently telling me, "This is Israel." She's trying to tell me where I'm from. This is a white woman telling me where I'm from. And it was brought up to management. And, yeah.
Where is she from, by the way? I mean, you just mentioned she's a white woman telling you where you're from.
Oh, she's from Nova Scotia.
She's from where?
She's from Nova Scotia, Halifax.
Yeah, and she wants to tell you about your background.
Where I'm from. Yeah.
We're seeing actually tremendous backlash of this type experienced by other young supporters of Palestinian human rights across the globe. there seems to be a strategy to marginalize them early on before their influence grows. Do you think that this is what's happening to you, that you're part of this campaign to marginalize young Palestinians?
I'd say I do believe 100% that Palestinian voices continue to want to be silenced because I said this before, that freedom of speech has a double standard. So like recently, for example, just 2 weeks ago, in the same city where I'm from, a white teacher at a high school made comments on her free time, same as me, and she was just saying, she was making fun of Hamas, she was making fun of the genocide in Gaza, she was saying Muslims need to be re-educated in camps, and the school knew that, and the school board knew that. She's still working, there's no discipline at all, her voice is not silenced. However, when it came to me talking about my own people, saying a factual statement that a free country cannot exist with an occupation, I was immediately fired. Less than 24 hours, I was fired. So Palestinian voices do continue to be silenced. However, I do think at a time like this that social media is really helping for people to see the Palestinian side. And I don't think we are ever able to rely on mainstream media. I think I don't think that is going to change anytime soon. As long as they have the funding, that's not going to change anything.
What has been your experience since your dismissal? Have you received a lot of support, and what is next for you?
So I have received a lot of support, and I will say I also have received some threats. But a lot of the threats are from Zionist group that were just saying stuff online, which is expected. That's what they do. They just hide behind the screen and then they just send messages. And so I also write freelance for Rabble Media. And for Rabble Media, I write a lot about Palestine. And because they give me the safe space to write about Palestine, and because, well, they are logical when it comes to their reporting. And so I write for them, and I definitely want to continue my journalism, whether it is on my social media, because I feel like I can't do journalism if it is for a mainstream, for a big company. And I knew that. I always knew that. I always knew I could never be a full journalist for like CTV, CBC, or Global, like the big companies, because my voice will be silent and I would have to sell my soul. So I always knew it's best I work behind the scenes for the big companies. But I will continue my journalism for sure. I will continue.
I'm not an expert on Canadian law, but it seems that you have a lawsuit. Reason for a lawsuit or a case for discrimination, because I was trying to find and look through the policy, and I've cited some of it about, you talk about diversity, but there is nothing that says that in your free time you cannot criticize a country that is committing genocide. And yet they fired you. Are you planning to talk, are you talking to lawyers about this?
Yes, I am actually talking to lawyers, and I can't go in detail, but like I do have a wrongful termination suit as well. And most definitely I'm going to go for human rights as well, because for even the fact that I was fired as the only Palestinian during a time of genocide of my own people is just a really bad move in general.
Have you also been in contact with other people who are in your position? Like again, I don't know too many cases, even though we've had earlier, maybe a few months ago, someone who worked for the Canadian, I think, public school systems, who was also put on notice for teaching people. Yeah, Javier. Yes, he was our guest, and then now I think he faced a similar thing. But we have several cases right here in the United States, ranging from professors at universities to students to just recently a new graduate who's a lawyer who had a job offer rescinded because of her views on Palestine. And this is something, because what we're talking about here is that there are so many talented, intelligent young people like yourself that have been victims of this brazen, well-publicized persecution. Do you think this will result in mobilization against this censoring and that an accounting will be made?
Oh, most definitely. I think people are getting more and more passionate right now. And the more and more people are seeing what's going on, the more people are able to advocate, whether it's on my behalf or for Palestine. So most definitely I will say these major companies are going to feel the wrath of the Palestinian supporters and the Palestinians for everything that we continue to go through.
And we've had also last week, actually, another Canadian guest who was talking about the large demonstrations happening in places like Toronto and Montreal and so forth that Canada never witnessed. These huge numbers. Do you feel that there is a shift within Canadian society about what's going on in Palestine?
Oh, yes, there is. There is a shift, I will say. There is a shift. It's better than before because so I also founded an organization called Free Palestine Halifax, where I hold rallies, marches, webinars, educational stuff for Palestine. For the time when I had started, I noticed that a lot of people a lot of the Canadian community do not know about Palestine. But then now it is a lot of people are hearing more about it and they're trying to educate themselves. And I think the biggest issue in Canada is in the Canadian community is there is ignorance that is involved. And a lot of people don't tend to educate themselves. But another thing I always say is continue to use the resources you are so privileged to have. Use the internet, use the social media, read the book. You have those resources to educate yourself about an ongoing genocide, about an ongoing occupation. And I think people are actually taking advantage of it now because people are protesting, because people are talking about it, because people are getting fired, So I look at the firing as a blessing in disguise because my story would not have been heard and if it wasn't for that. And as a Palestinian, I don't think my voice would have been heard largely if it wasn't for that either.
Very good attitude. I really admire, and of course sympathize with what you've been going through. Yara Jamal, thank you for coming on Arab Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jamal.
That's the voice and the face of Yara Jamal, production assistant and web writer at CTV Atlantic in the Atlantic Bureau, Jamal, talking about this outrageous attack on journalistic freedom. She was fired unceremoniously, and as you mentioned in the lead-up, this is part of an emerging trend where young professionals who are Palestinian or speak on behalf and, speaking about what's happening in Palestine in a more kind of honest and direct way are being doxxed, are being fired, are being challenged, and are being silenced. This is just one of many examples. It's a pretty disturbing one, actually.
It's very disturbing, especially when you start targeting journalists. I mean, we know about targeting academics and now lawyers, but the first thing that they teach you in journalism school is your First Amendment and freedom of speech and so forth. And by the way, she was expressing her own opinion on her own private time, and she never identified herself as a spokesperson for CTV or even identified herself as an employee of CTV. This came later on after those trolls started tweeting about her and about her statement, and then her employer, as we saw in the interview, terminated her basically without a warning. And when she asked for an explanation, they didn't have. Basically, they said you violated something like our rules, which don't exist, by the way. There is nothing that says you cannot criticize a foreign country. We're talking about Canada TV. This is here in Canada, you cannot criticize a foreign country. Anyway, we're going to be following up with this story later on, and then moving on to a lot of things. Just in the past 48 hours, Israel has murdered 300 Palestinians in less than 48 hours when it resumed its bombing of Gaza. And in the intro, you were mentioning about bombing the north and south, but really, they've dropped flyers telling people where to go. And if you look at those flyers that people have posted, a map that literally doesn't leave any option for these poor residents to go to. And when they go, They move from north to south. They bomb them. When they move from south to north, they also bomb them. And 60% of those who died in the past few days were children and women.
Yeah, Jamal, it's kind of outrageous that the way the media have been portraying it, and they've been parroting the Israeli military talking points that somehow Israel is allowing safe zones for the 1.8 million Palestinians who've been internally displaced, who are moving from the north to the south to, quote, safe spaces. It's a complete joke, Jamal. These bombings and these attacks and the mortar fire and the attacks from the sea and from the air continued in the last 48 hours non-stop. And as you mentioned, over 350 Palestinians have been murdered. But let's not talk about the hundreds of thousands that are internally displaced, the thousands that are injured right now, and they continue to attack. And this is really important for our listeners and viewers, Jamal. They continue to attack hospitals. They've kidnapped 30 doctors and other health professionals. And the attack on the healthcare infrastructure on Gaza continues unabated. So there's absolutely no safe space anywhere in the Gaza Strip right now, Jamal. And of course, the United States remains completely ineffective. They are now trying to backtrack a little bit, Jamal. This is an interesting thing. As Israel rains down terror on Palestinian civilians, you hear Antony Blinken and Vice President Harris saying, "Oh, we've cautioned Israel to protect and take great care at protecting civilians." What a joke! They've given the United States cover, free rein, free get out of jail card to promote the Israeli atrocities that are being committed against Palestinians, and now they want to cover themselves. Frankly, Jamal, it's a big joke to see Kamala Harris, Antony Blinken, and Lloyd Austin, who's the Secretary of the military, basically saying, "Oh, we're warning Israel not to do anything." But when you look at the facts on the ground, Jamal, civilians are being killed, women and children are being killed, and there's no place safe in Gaza as we speak.
You're absolutely right. They are totally oblivious, and they are in denial that they've green-lighted basically the bombing from day one. When President Biden and Antony Blinken both went to Israel to say that Israel has the right to defend itself, and they gave it the carte blanche to keep bombing Gaza, and then resupplied it with more bombs and missiles. And now we are approaching the number, and by the time, probably and sadly, when this show goes on the air, it's going to be more than 16,000 civilians who have been slaughtered in Gaza. And now they're saying, "Oh, we're cautioning the Israelis not to kill civilians," and they should.
What a joke!
Yeah, I mean, they can, and that's why you're seeing these global demonstrations. And it's not just the United States, but it's also the UK, France, Canada, Germany, and so on, who can, in a matter of hours, order Israel to stop its campaign. but they're not doing it. And I don't
They
know
won't
what's
do
the
it, Jamal.
threshold. And I don't know what's the threshold. How many Palestinians are they're waiting to see killed? How many children are they waiting to see slaughtered before they order it to to stop its campaign? And as you've mentioned, they've made all these excuses. They started like one pretext and they moved to another pretext. The first pretext that Hamas, you know what? The one thing the Israelis haven't done, they haven't found Hamas. And I'm serious. Hamas has found, but they haven't found Hamas. They've said, and we're waiting to see that Hamas operation center, whatever the control center they called it,
command center
was beneath the Al Shifa hospital. They destroyed most of Al Shifa hospital. They went there and they showed you this ridiculous video. I mean, a command center with no command, like nothing is there, just like an empty room telling you a lie about a calendar on the wall. And now they bombed UNRWA. They bombed UNRWA hospital, school, and they're telling you Hamas is hiding under that school. Again, same nonsense story. Hamas is not in UNRWA. They just go there and then they scatter a few pieces of weapons and say Hamas are there. Well, if they're there, show us all these Hamas soldiers that you have killed, or all of them, all these fighters that you have imprisoned. Then they move somewhere else, and the same thing they say. They were initially in this area, and they tell the civilians we're bombing. Let's start by bombing the south and whatever. Now move to the north, and well, where is Hamas? It's not there. You go and they go into wherever the civilians have moved to. They bomb them. And that's the game they have been playing. They basically, and let's just kind of think about it this way. If they're saying anything that is true, I tell you something, the Hamas send about 1,000 to 1,500 fighters. That's a well documented, who infiltrated into the Israeli settlements and military posts there. Israel has killed more than 15,000 civilians after trying to identify and eliminate, according to them, the 1,500 fighters. Does that make any sense to you?
No, Jamal, it doesn't make any sense. And I think, what our listeners and viewers probably have understood from following our reporting for so many years now is that this is not a campaign against Hamas. This is not a campaign to root out Hamas from Gaza. This is a campaign to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Gaza, from the West Bank, from Jerusalem, from historic Palestine. The Israelis have lied from day one. They continue to lie. They continue to offer propaganda and husbandar about what they're doing. There is no command center in Al Shifa. There are no command centers under UNRWA schools and hospitals. It's one big catastrophic lie that they're using to ethnically cleanse and remove Palestinians from historic Palestine. Let's be clear about it, Jamal. And I want to be clear about another thing. The United States is a complicit partner with Israel. The Biden administration, the State Department, the U.S. military, they are complicit partners in this genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and in historic Palestine. Because the words coming from Biden, from Blinken, from Harris, and from Austin are a big joke. Does anybody really believe that the Israeli military, the apartheid state, is going to be told what to do? The United States implicitly and in some cases explicitly is supporting the slaughter of Palestinian civilians, Jamal. And no one should believe Kamala Harris. No one should believe Antony Blinken. No one should believe President Biden. It's all complete rubbish. And while they're spewing this rubbish, they're continuing to support this genocide that's occurring against Palestinians in Gaza right now, unabated. Do not believe the hype. Every day.
The intent was revealed just 3 days into the war, and the intent was
that's right.
to transfer all Palestinians into Sinai. I mean, they said that this was leaked, and then it was affirmed, and that was the intent. And when it blew in their face, when Egypt said no way, we're going to allow Palestinians there, they started shifting and changing their story. And then we're going to move on to the next story, but this is part of the next story. Just is that the worst thing about it is, starting with President Biden onwards and all the media right here in the United States and others, now, of course, they're starting to walk back some of the stories, all the lies about children being beheaded, and this was debunked, and bodies were, corpses were burned, and that was debunked. And then we find out that Israel actually bombed the cars of the festival goers, and also attacked some homes where Hamas members were there, and killed Israelis along with some of the fighters there, and burned their bodies because it's like big missiles. But then you have, and no one has apologized, by the way. They, like President Biden said, they showed me some pictures, and now he's just like walking it softly back, but not saying clearly that I was duped and I repeated a lie.
Right.
And then now we found out just a couple of days ago, the big story was that Palestinians are faking the death of children, our babies. Imagine, you got over 6,000 kids were killed, like 6,000 bodies. And then and we don't have the number of the ones who are still under the rubble, Jess. And then
right.
Parents going, and during that grief, holding their baby and wishing the baby to be alive, or crying over the baby, lamenting, etc. And then they start marking the story because this baby looked like so angelic, kind of like looked like a doll in the way he died. This is like one particular, and there are other cases like this. And then the Jerusalem Post, this is one of Israel's largest newspapers, and one of the most well-read newspapers because it also publishes in English, and says that Hamas, or whatever, Palestinians, not Hamas, are faking these stories and putting dolls. And then later on, there were all kinds of different angles verified by journalists. Took like about 3 days. Well, meanwhile, millions and millions of social media, basically hits, were out there by all these Hasbaristas marketing the story, including some of them right here in the United States, and saying, look at this, Palestinian. Imagine this, during the grief and the agony of the parents, they say that they were lying about the death of their parents. Well, guess what? And 2 days ago, the Jerusalem Post admitted they had to publish it after they got, and I for one wrote them and shamed them for doing this story. And by the way, the head of the Jerusalem Post, no other than American-born Avi, whatever. He's basically former Israeli soldier and Hasbarista,
right?
And since he took over, even got the Jerusalem Post was bad, but now it's worse. And then finally, they had to say, we got duped. They blamed it on others. We got something from unverified sources. You are a newspaper. How do you publish a picture of a grieving father holding his baby, and you say that this was a doll and it was a complete act, and then you say, oh, we just got it from an unverified source? So that's the big story here, Jess, is not that Palestinians are getting slaughtered like 100 per day. The big story is that the media is playing along, peddling Israeli lies, and politicians in the United States, starting from the President of the United States to congressmen to senators to the State Department, are also peddling these lies.
Well, that's exactly right, Jamal. You're 100% right. And the apology, it wasn't even apology from Jerusalem Post. It was not even a mea culpa. They were more like, oh, the source was unverified. But it's a symptom, and I think you're exactly right, of a larger complicity of the mainstream media in the United States and globally in the West, who are just taking the talking points from the Israeli media, digesting them, and throwing them up on the world. The problem with that, Jamal, and it goes, as you said, from President Biden all the way down to Anthony Blinken and beyond, they've been digesting and throwing up these lies for such a long time. But people don't believe it anymore, Jamal. You have millions of people, as you alluded to earlier, protesting in the streets, demanding that the world say no to Israeli genocide of Palestinians. No one believes what the politicians or the mainstream media is saying anymore. I mean, they've been caught in lies for 57 days now, Jamal. The lies of the Israeli military, the lies of the U.S. government, the lies of President Biden and all of the accomplices in the White House and in the Congress and in the various secretariats of the U.S. government. It's all been a complete fabrication. Now, because they've been caught, they're trying to make some noises to backtrack a little bit. But Jamal, the backtracking is insulting to every single person of conscience. It's insulting to every Palestinian who's lost a child. It's an insult. It's insulting to anybody who sees the reality of going on. Oh, we're telling Israel to protect civilians. All you have to do, Jamal, is look at what's happening right now in the safe zone in Gaza and the south and see how many Palestinians have lost their lives, have lost their homes, and are living without food, water, or medicine right now. It's a complete fabrication. They will be held accountable eventually. I do believe that, though.
Absolutely. They have, as far as I'm concerned, they have blood on their hands. They are responsible. When you peddle a lie and cause death and destruction, and you cause the death of innocent civilians, and you cause the death of children, you're going to be held accountable for this. Sooner or later, you're going to be held accountable for this. And I just, like mentioned, we have so many stories. And who's going to pay for that? We saw throughout the world, people are demonstrating. Most of them are young intellectuals, students, etc. They're really, the masses are demonstrating because they know the truth. And politicians are deaf, or they bury their heads in the sand. And now, of course, the United States is okay to send, $8.7 billion to Israel because of the war. Now they're making the noise, reading through the Israeli media, that the economy is in shambles. $53 billion.
Of course.
That's the bill. The bill to the war so far is $53 billion. This is according to economists, Israeli economists. This is according to an article published in Haaretz. Who's going to pay for that? I'd like to know that.
Well,
let's pose this question right now instead of waiting to hear from the Senate to approve a new when they cannot basically feed the hungry in the United States and rebuild schools. Who's gonna pay for the $53 billion?
But Jamal, we know who's going to pay. You're going to pay. I'm going to pay. Every U.S. citizen's going to pay. Every Canadian citizen, citizens all over the world are going to pay for the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. They're going to pay for the Israeli economy. They're going to pay to rebuild the Israeli war machine. And even though, Jamal, we cannot feed children in the United States, 30 million children every night go to bed hungry in the United States, even though there's homeless, even though there's a recession, even though there's inflation, even though we have mass disparities, if you will, in health and in the economies here in the United States, the tax dollars that could be going to help all of those inequities here in the United States is going to go to Israel to fund the war machine. It will, and they won't be held accountable for the impact that's going to have on the economy and on people here, let alone the impact that it's having right now on Palestinians every single day, Jamal, because Israel is still controlling the amount of aid that's coming in from Egypt right now. We're still barely getting, we need 500 trucks a day under normal circumstances. What? A couple of hundred trucks have gotten in basically over the last week. So the Israeli economy is taking a big hit right now, as it should, and American taxpayers should be up in arms thinking about their tax dollars are going to go to fill the bill. If you say
And
pay the bill, if you will.
You know what argument your favorite politicians will make to write that check? They will say, "Oh, we've spent over $70 billion in Ukraine. What's $53 billion?" That's what they're going to be saying.
They're going to say that.
They're going to say that.
Right.
We spent over 70, so what the heck? $70 billion or over $70 billion supporting a war in Ukraine, and we'll give another $53 billion over on top of $8 billion, and U.S. taxpayers will end up paying the bill. The last point you wanted to make, just there is a hashtag now. What's the hashtag?
Hashtag is dump Biden. And I think this is really important, Jamal, because over the weekend, a number of very big organizing groups have met in Michigan, in the Detroit area, and they're forming a very large coalition among all of the swing states right now, and they're starting to mobilize groups and around the hashtag of dump Biden, which means basically not voting for Biden-Harris in 2024, either not voting at all or voting for other candidates. And here's the idea, Jamal, and I have to say, I brought this up in the last couple of shows, and now it's gaining steam. The Democratic Party has to pay a price for the blood on its hands, for supporting genocide and not taking a stand to stop the genocide that this country and Joe Biden embraced and promoted against Palestinians in Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem. So I think people are saying to themselves, why should we, as progressives, as Democrats, continue to support Joe Biden and the Democrats when they continue to let us down, they support genocide, they go against policies that are truly progressive? And I think this is a group, Jamal, of not just Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, but it's African Americans, it's Latinos, it's API communities. It's a large group of progressive and liberal Democrats who are saying, why should we continue to support the Democrats when they just take us for granted? So I, for one, am promoting this hashtag dump Biden.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll speak to you next week.
See you next week.